Warm welcome to this lecture series on organizational behavior. We are in this chapter on decision making, and this is our second section of the lecture on this chapter. Quick summary of what happened in the previous lecture. We looked at the importance of decision making in the organizational context. We also discussed about the role of individual decision making and the group decision making in organizational effectiveness. We looked at different approaches to decision making. Broadly, there are two approaches: rational approach and intuitive approach. So we spoke about the limitations and advantages of both the approaches, and we also spoke about a concept called bounded rationality. Bounded rationality is understanding the boundaries of the rational decision making. We also looked at in detail some of the barriers to effective decision making. So many of these barriers are about not taking decision or not understanding the importance of taking a decision. So broadly we classify them into not accepting the problem and not deciding to decide. So not accepting the problem may involve being comfortable with the current state, or in a very active way avoiding making the decision. So we looked at the problems in each of these barriers to effective decision making. So this is where we stopped in the previous lecture. So in this lecture we will talk about some of the biases in decision making. So biases means wrong way of looking at a problem or very one-sided approach in decision making. In fact, in decision making, like I said earlier, we make decisions even without understanding that we are making a decision. We may not even acknowledge we are in a decision making situation, but we might be making a decision. So many of these decisions which we make without even knowing we are making a decision, many of these biases might creep in. We might be committing some of these biases in those kind of unconscious decision making. So there are many decision making biases. I am listing some of the important ones which may occur very frequently. The first bias or the first problem which groups or individuals might encounter in decision making is framing. Framing means the way we look at a problem changes the way it is presented to us. So depending on the way a problem is defined to the group or to an individual, we look at it in a certain way. So I'll give an example. Let's say there is a new drug which has been tested in a huge sample. So the risk involved or the side effects may occur in 2% of the population tested. Let's say 2% of the population are prone to certain side effects which might be dangerous if the drug is given. Okay. So let's say if I ask you, should we say okay to this drug? Should we pass the drug to the public? Let's say the drug may be a very important drug because it may help people get out of a very serious disorder. Okay, so something like COVID-19. So for COVID-19, I'm coming out with a drug which and 2% of the people who take this drug may show some serious side effects. So this is the scenario. Okay. So if I say this, many of you will think it is okay to pass this drug because this particular disorder, this particular disease is a very serious disease. Okay. So, but on the other hand, if I frame the problem in a different way, if I say, if I give this drug in India, maybe around 4 crore people may get side effects. Okay. So specifying exact numbers instead of percentages may sound a huge difference. Okay, and I say 4 crore people may have serious side effects because of this drug, instead of saying 2% of people will get affected. Okay, 2 seems to be a small number, 4 crore seems to be a big number, but we forget the fact that 2% and 4 crore are more or less the equal number. Okay, so how you frame the problem becomes a yardstick for us to make a decision. Okay, so many times in negotiations or in marketing, where people have to sell certain things, persuasion, framing becomes a very important tool. So instead of saying the negative thing, or if you want to say a negative thing, you say it in a certain way that people may not even pay attention to it. Okay, so this is what is framing. Prospect theory is, which is similar to the earlier slide, where people don't want to take or people don't want to get into a decision making scenario because they may find the risk involved in a negative consequence of the decision to be more important or more threatening than the benefits of making that decision. Okay, this is what is prospect theory. People avoid taking decisions because if the decision goes wrong, the loss might be, or they perceive the loss to be very serious than the actual benefits of taking the decision. Okay, so this is what is prospect theory, which is like risk aversive behavior. They don't want to take the risk and get blamed for a negative consequence, whereas the effect of it might be very good. There might be chances that the decision will lead to a positive gain. Okay, so these things make people avoid taking decisions. The third decision making bias is representativeness, which means in decision making, when we seek information, we tend to make or evaluate the information based on stereotypes. Stereotypes means, if you remember in attitudes, we spoke about attitude and perception chapter, we spoke about stereotypes. Stereotype means typical information. Okay, so this information we tend to compare it with the typical information and judge this particular information as, or over evaluate this information as a typical information. I'll give an example. Let's say you are making a decision for job employment. You are selecting people, okay, for a particular job. You are selecting people for a job of a driver, okay, somebody who drives a car or a taxi. Okay, so let's say you get a female candidate as an applicant. Typically we assume that, or you have seen very few women in this profession. Okay, or you feel that, or stereotype or negative prejudice in terms of women cannot drive or women may not be good drivers, you don't select women. Okay, similarly nurse, we assume all nurses to be women, may not necessarily. There are many, in fact nurse is not a gendered word. Okay, there can be many men who can be nurses also. Okay, so based on a certain assumption which is already there, which is wrong, you make or choose a information and evaluate that information based on your previous assumptions, which are generalized in nature. Okay, so this is what is stereotype. Availability, which is similar to the earlier bias, which is representativeness bias. In availability bias, what we do is we evaluate information or the chances of a particular occurrence based on what comes to our mind. Okay, like I said earlier, when we think about nurse, we only visualize female nurses. When we think about drivers, we only think about male drivers. Okay, so based on our available information, which can be wrong, okay, we make decisions. Another example can be, let's say you want to invest in a particular organization. Okay, you want to buy shares of a particular organization, and this organization you have remembered to be a very successful organization. It was there for many years, and it has been, according to your memory, it is a profitable organization. But let's say if you look at the actual numbers, if you compare two organizations, maybe older organization not necessarily means a successful organization. It does not necessarily mean it may make profit always. Whereas there's another option available, which is a newer organization which you think it has not made profits in the recent times. May not necessarily true. You don't remember that particular information about the second organization. Okay, so we make decisions based on available information to our immediate memory. Many a times that can be biased also. Okay, the next bias can be anchoring and adjustment bias. So again, this happens in negotiation kind of a situation, when you have to make decision, or somebody is giving you information, based on that you need to make a decision. So when somebody gives you information, similar to framing, where in framing they give a number in a way that it doesn't look alarming, in anchoring also they give you a number, or they give you an initial figure which becomes the benchmark for us to make the decision. Okay, even though the initial number might be an irrelevant number. For example, like I said, in negotiation, when people give the initial number, they give a very big number. Okay, so let's say you are negotiating with an auto rickshaw person. Okay, in some cities, auto rickshaw people they negotiate very illogically, or they are very they say a number which is like very, very exaggerated. So they will say a number which is like too high. Even half of it might be not correct. Let's say if somebody says 400 rupees, even 200 rupees is not a correct number. But usually what we do, if somebody gives a number like 400, we will adjust it to 200. But the but the correct number might be 100. Because initially somebody said 400 rupees, we come to 200 rupees, we negotiate for 200 rupees, but in reality, or the correct figure might be 100. So anyway, we are the one who's losing. So many times in negotiations, the first figure which is given to us might be an exaggerated figure, must be a very skewed figure. We should be very aware that, we should be very clear that we should not get affected by this initial number. But many a times people get influenced by this initial number, because that is where the anchor for negotiation or decision making is kept, and we adjust it only to a certain level which may not be correct. So you should be aware that this anchoring might be a very wrong figure. Okay. The another important decision making bias is overconfidence. So we tend to be very certain of our own judgments. Because of our earlier experiences, we think we might be always correct. So you would have heard people saying that I have made this kind of decisions 1,000 times in my lifetime. Okay, so this is like cakewalk to me. So these kind of statements denote somebody is overconfident, and if you are overconfident, there are more chances that you will overlook certain minute information, or very small information which might be very important at later points in time. Okay, so overconfidence leads to missing out important information which may not be very obviously seen in decision making. Okay. So these are some of the barriers and problems which groups or individuals will encounter in decision making. So now we get into group decision making. So the earlier slides spoke about general issues and biases related to decision making, but here we are going to talk about specifically on group decision making. But before getting into the problems or the advantages of group decision making, we have to discuss about which is better, individuals making decision is better or groups making decisions is better. Because especially in organizational context, in some organizations the individual manager makes the decision, the manager doesn't consult with others in the organization. Whereas certain organizations where decisions are made in a very democratic process, through a democratic process, which what I mean to say is decisions are made at a group level. So again, it depends on the organizational culture. Some organizations, they trust individual capacity, or they trust individual capability, and they trust that individuals can make better decisions. Whereas some organizations which are very democratic, they believe in the power of groups. Groups can make better decisions. Individual decision making relies on individual expertise. Group decision making believes in the group's consensus and group's collective wisdom. Okay. So which is good or which is more effective? In fact, both are effective depending on the context and depending on the problem. Okay. But usually the advantage of group decision making is there is more participation in the decision making. When people are involved in decision making, they feel they are committed to the decision making. They also feel they are respected. Okay, there is some level of commitment to the decision making if you also are part of the decision making. Whereas in individual decision making, when managers make the decision and tell the subordinates or their team members, this is a decision made, you have to follow it, many people may question it, or they may not feel they may not feel as a part of the organization or the group. Okay, so group decision making is a better mechanism to involve people in organizational processes, and also it gives a sense of justice and fairness. If you remember in procedural justice, when people are involved in making, or if when people understand there is transparency in decision making, they feel the organization is just. So group decision making has other advantages apart from the effectiveness of the decisions. But again, for us, the effectiveness of the decision is of foremost importance. Okay, so which is more effective? That is the question. Again, like I said, it depends on the context, but some of the pros and cons. The advantage of group decision making, like I said, it makes people part of the group. But individual decision making is quick in nature. If there is an emergency decision to be made, when you involve a lot of people in decision making, it takes a lot of time to arrive at a consensus. But individual decision making, the person can make the decision very quickly. Similarly, if the individual is like an expert in this area, if he or she knows, or if he or she is clear about or thorough about how to resolve this problem or how to make a decision, you don't need to involve people who are not experts in this area. Okay, so if the individual is expert, you don't need to involve the group. And also individual decision making involves you don't need to sell the idea to others. If the individual, you don't need to convince people, you don't need to talk to people and say this is the idea. You need to all these group decision making processes involve convincing others, or listening to others, convincing each other. All those problems are not there when individual decision making is made. But again, group decision making, when people come together, they feel committed. And also there is this idea called synergy. Synergy means when different people come together in collaborations, if you manage the group process well, you can get best out of all the members. When you get best out of all the members, the collective decision made or the collective effort can be much bigger or better than the individual effort. Okay, so it is like this Gestalt's theory. The sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, So individually people might be not best in their area, but when they come together, the positives of all the people, when you put them together, it becomes a huge success. Okay, this is what is synergy. So another important aspect of group decision making is best team member versus the team, which means sometimes the team might have a best team member. You know, some cricket teams you will have star players, okay, but star players, when they play individually, they may not succeed. So a team having star players doesn't mean that team is the best team. But if you see some teams, cricket teams or sports teams, team members might be mediocres in nature, but then they collectively come together. That is where synergy happens. You know, they work as a team, they complement each other's efforts, they help each other, they cooperate each other, and the team becomes the best team. Okay, so best team member is better, or the team is better, or whether the team is able to get the best out of the best team member, or it uses the best team member's efforts or the expertise to the fullest so that the team achieves the best outcome. Okay, so this is a very important secret of success of teams. So if the team is able to get best out of its team members, not necessarily the best team member, every team member, it can be the best team. Especially if the team has the best team member, the team should know how to make the best out of the best team member. Okay, so who should do it, or what will make it happen? The first and foremost thing is group processes. The group processes are the way group works together, the way group team or the group's goals are defined, the way leadership is played, or the role of the leadership. All these factors play an important role in making this synergy become a reality. And also nature of the problem. Sometimes the problem itself can be a very biased problem, or the problem itself can be a very one-sided problem where you don't need all the team members. Some problems involve every team member's collective effort. Some problems involve only one person can solve it. You don't need everyone. Similarly, some problem can cause disturbance, or they can create rift among people. Let's say the discussion on a very sensitive issue involving everyone can be a very serious issue, no? But again, you need to involve people, especially when the issue is a very sensitive issue, because everybody should know what is happening. Okay, so nature of the problem can also decide whether the group will be effective or the individual will be effective. And also another important aspect in group decision making is risk taking. So sometimes groups will take higher risk because the responsibility of making a decision is shared. So if the group fails, you cannot pinpoint one member. Okay, but an individual fails, you can pinpoint that individual. So in individual decision making, the individual will be very careful in making the decision. Sometimes too cautious that they may not even make the decision, because if they fail, the risk will be on their head. They will be held responsible. In groups can take, or they tend to take very high risk because of the fact that the responsibility is shared among all the members. So there is no accountability on individual member. The accountability is on the team, so the blame is on the team. So individuals in the group tend to take more risk. So collectively the group also takes more risk. Okay, so I'll stop here. In the next section, we'll talk about the processes of decision making in teams, and also the problems teams might encounter in decision making. So till then, take care. We'll meet in the next lecture.